Today here in court in front of the jury, you've talked about that you were concerned that Cathy was going to attack your grandson, and then you listed a bunch of different weapons. But weren't you more concerned that your grandson, who had killed someone before and had been violent countless times with your daughter, weren't you concerned that he was the one that was going to attack your daughter?
No. He had not been violent countless times with Cathy. Cathy had been violent with him countless times.
Now, a lot of the things you've said here today, you never bothered to tell me or law enforcement or anyone.
Objection. Judge, it's improper impeachment.
Ms. Dethman, as it pertains to your grandson, do you talk to him a lot on the phone since he's been in jail?
Yes.
Okay. Do you do any emailing with him?
I don't email with him while he's in jail. No. Just talking on the phone.
Talk with him?
Yes.
All right. And how many times a week would you say that you talk to your grandson on the phone?
I usually talk to him 3 times. I encourage him to pray. I ask him if he's eating. I mean, I'm a dietitian, that's what I do. That he's drinking his milk, that he's exercising in his cell, and most important, that he's reading books. And I keep telling him, you have got to pray. You have got to read your Bible.
Now, I mean, this is an obvious question, but you love your grandson, correct?
Yes.
Your daughter is dead, clearly.
Yes.
And she's not coming back, correct?
No.
Now, would you agree that you don't want to see the defendant have to go to prison for a very long time? Is that correct?
I don't want to see my grandson go to prison for something he didn't do.
All right. Well, you couldn't make it any more crystal clear that you're up there and all your answers that you've given have been driven by you believing that the defendant, your grandson, didn't murder your daughter, correct?
I am giving clear answers, sir, as to what happened. I know my daughter. That's why I didn't want her coming that day to the house without me being there. I wanted her to wait the next day so that maybe she could calm down a little bit.
You know your grandson too, correct?
Yes.
And you know his history, correct?
Yes.
Now, you say you know what happened, but you weren't there when it happened.
No, I'm not saying that I know what happened. I know the possibility of what could have happened. I wasn't there, so I have no way of knowing. I just know the facts about Cathy, having lived with her and worked with her, even to try to maintain her sanity, to try to maintain that she could keep her job as a teacher, to try to maintain that she wasn't trying to slice herself and kill herself,
okay,
and
let's
not coming after my husband with a gun.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Cathy. Now, it sounded like she had some mental problems. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you would probably agree that it didn't help that she got impregnated when she was just a child, correct?
She was 13. She got impregnated when she ran away from the Hope House, and they found her in the hotel with her boyfriend. It didn't help that she was damaged goods, and he didn't want anything to do with her.
Ma'am, it sounds like you're really quick to try to throw dirt on your dead daughter. Would you agree with that?
No, not at all. My dead daughter did the best that she could. We have a problem in this country with addressing mental health. We all know that. And that's what she had. She had mental health issues. At times, she was the greatest person on the world. Very intelligent.
I appreciate that, ma'am. I appreciate that. Now, your daughter worked as a teacher for many, many years, correct?
Yes, she did.
And her students loved her, correct?
Yes, they did, for the most part. I mean, as with any teachers, you're going to have some students that, I mean, I'm an educator myself. You're going to have some students that don't. For the most part, yes.
And she cared about her students, correct?
Yes, she did.
She had a passion and a love for teaching.
Yes, she did.
And she taught, predominantly she taught English, correct?
Yes.
And she cared so much about her students that at a certain point, she let one of her students move in when she was married to her ex-husband, Chuck, correct?
Yes.
And then, unfortunately for your daughter, Chuck took advantage of this underage student, is what is believed to have happened, correct? And
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of all this.
Approach.
This is a clumsy, clumsy cross. When you cross a witness, you box them in, you ask them short, tight questions. They're not telling the story. You are, as the lawyer, and he's making the mistake of asking these questions that's just inviting her to argue, and she is ready to fight. Best thing he said was that she wants to throw dirt on her dead daughter. He should have stayed with that line of questioning. It was good. We're going to hit a break. We'll hear more of the cross together live next.
Was the biggest story in the world.
People saw the facts differently.
Somebody manufactured evidence in this case.
This was kind of a crazy spectacle.
This case is a circus.
He was an icon.
They are in for the fight of their lives.
Everybody thinks you're guilty.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? A Court TV original series. Premieres February 16th. Only on Court TV.
Maker. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. We are loving your tweets here at Court TV. So many of you saying how bad this is, that we have the victim's own mother, the one who birthed her, testifying for the defense, supporting her grandson over her own daughter, who she is very blatantly disparaging on the stand. And two of you, I loved your comments about how, what is grandma's end game? Is it to free Collin here and bring him back to live with her? Is that what Grandma wants? We're about to see more of this cross that has not been very good so far. It's been clumsy, missed opportunity to do a proper impeachment. Let's see what else the prosecution has got. There's a lot to work with here with this lady.
Miss Dethman, I'm sorry we have to talk about some unpleasant things, but it'll be over soon enough.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. So, do you recall my last question?
Yes. You were asking me why I was spilling dirt on my dead daughter, and I said I'm not. I said I supported her. I've gone into massive debt in trying to ensure that she had...
I appreciate that, but that was a few questions ago.
Oh, you're talking about how Cathy ran away from the Hope House and they found her in the...
No, I'm not talking about that either, but if you listen to my questions,
Just ask the question.
it'll get easier. So, we were talking about your daughter, that she was a very committed teacher and very committed to the youth of her classroom. And I mentioned that at a certain point, she even allowed one of her students to move into the household, and it was believed that Chuck had an inappropriate relationship with this student. Are you aware of that? With a yes or no answer, if we can start at that place, I'd appreciate it. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And you were not a big fan of Chuck, as it ended up being the divorce, correct? For how he treated her, from how he impregnated her as a child through the years, being physically, emotionally, and mentally abusive to your daughter. I can't imagine you were a fan of that, were you?
No, Robert was the one that was a fan of Chuck.
Now, ma'am, I understand that you hate your ex-husband.
I don't hate him.
Well, it sounds like you're throwing stuff about Robert in a lot.
You just asked me if I was a fan, and I wanted to tell you who in the family was. I knew Chuck from the time he was...
Ms. Dethman,
I'm sorry.
that's the point. He gets to ask the questions
I'm sorry.
to elicit the information he's looking for. If additional information is needed, Ms. Thornhill or Mr. Henry will make sure to address it. So just pay close attention to the question that's asked and try to answer just the question that's asked.
I apologize.
That's all right. Mr. Levine.
Appreciate it. Ms. Dethman, as it pertains to your last piece of information that you provided, as it pertains to your husband, he hated Chuck for what Chuck did to his daughter, that being impregnating a little girl, correct?
I'm going to object to the relevance of and to speculation about what Robert thought about Chuck.
Sustain this to relevance.
All right, Ms. Dethman, if I ask you a question that, for your information, just please answer it, irrespective of your feelings about your ex-husband, all right? Now, at a certain point, Cathy got divorced from Chuck, correct?
Yes, sir.
After years of unthinkable abuse, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's move on to a different subject matter. When your grandson lived in Oklahoma with his dad for about 3 years or so, at the end of that, your grandson wanted to come live with Cathy and actually was able to, correct?
Yes.
And Cathy was very happy about that, correct?
Yes.
And she felt that she had missed out, understandably so, on multiple years of her son's life, correct?
Yes.
And she
You've got to control your witness. When you are cross-examining your witness, you have to control them. You keep them on a short leash. This prosecutor has lost all control, and the judge kind of had mercy on him. The judge stepped in without being asked and said to her, you have to answer the questions as they're being asked. She is running all over him. This witness is combative. What's her agenda here? Let's talk about this. Let's bring in Sonny Slaughter for some final thoughts. Sonny, as you're sitting here watching this, what are you thinking, please?
Julie, first, thanks for having me on today. This trial is really it's eye-opening for the public, and you are absolutely right. I have been once again screaming behind the scenes to stop talking. I'm not a lawyer, but I am not impressed with this cross-examination, and you're right, the judge had to step in. I think this shows something really important. What we thought may have been a strategy may not have necessarily been the safe strategy. They just did not understand that they should have been objecting, like the defense is now objecting during their cross. I don't know what her end game is, except for the fact that I believe this family has been so dysfunctional for so long that she is really running away with everything, and I think it's detrimental to the case. I hope it does not have a long-lasting impact like that he could potentially get off or get a lesser sentence. I hope the jury's paying attention.
Right, Sonny, right. Yeah, that's a good point, you know, because we're watching it from afar, and I haven't seen one tweet from anybody who's saying they like Grandma and they are in agreement with what she's doing here and the way the defense has presented this. So you have to wonder if the jury is as angry as so many of the members of our Cordy family are hearing this. It just reeks of insensitivity and a lack of empathy here. And there's more. There's more. We're not done. Sonny Slaughter, we always love having you on the show. Thank you for everything today. We'll say goodbye for now. Stay where you are at home. The cross is going to continue for Collin's grandmother. Apparently, she's turned into one of his biggest advocates, and it is her daughter who's the deceased. Yes, her own daughter. We'll see if the prosecution can impeach her when we come back.
This is Court TV Live. I'm Kelly Craft, sitting in today for Ted Rollins. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are tracking several trials and cases across the country. The first in Florida, the defense case is underway in the deadly son murder trial. This is for 17-year-old Collin Griffith. We'll get you back to court in just a moment. Also, we are in Massachusetts. We are monitoring testimony in the bench trial for Penny McGee. She is accused of causing the death of her ex-husband after the two got into an argument and he collapsed. Also, we are in Tennessee. It is day one of the jury selection in the Baby Evelyn murder trial for defendant Megan Boswell. But let's get you back to court for Collin Griffith. This is the murder trial that's taking place in Florida. On the stand is the defendant's grandmother, Susan Dethman.
And she was trying to fix or make your grandson's life better?
She was trying to improve his lifestyle, yes.
Now, you mentioned you described it as a fight in Port Charlotte where law enforcement came because you said your daughter was beating Collin with a belt that made him do sit-ups and push-ups. You remember that?
I did push-ups. I took away the sit-ups. It was push-ups and putting the weights above his head and running in place.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Now, you remember talking to law enforcement when they came out there, correct?
Yes.
And giving a sworn statement because you just wanted both parties, your grandson and your daughter, you wanted everybody to be safe and healthy and happy, correct?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Dethman, as to the root of what the issue was that night, do you remember telling the deputy that the three of you were at the dining room table and Susan had Collin seated down and Cathy told Collin that she would be implementing new parenting rules and Collin would be having his Xbox, his cell phone, and other items taken away as disciplinary action due to him being disrespectful to her? Do you recall telling law enforcement that?
I remember telling law enforcement about the Xbox would be, I don't know if it was taken away, but it was going to be restricted.
And at that time, your grandson didn't want to hear from his mom, and so he stood up and threatened to fight her and said, let's just do it, correct?
That was after the incident with the exercising and belt, the beating of the belt. That's when Cathy wanted us to all sit down and eat sandwiches. Like it literally went from one extreme to another. Sit down and eat sandwiches. And then Collin got up from the table and said, let's just do it. And I went to go get my phone to contact Officer Rentis or Corporal Rentis or Officer Lacey.
Okay, all right, very good. Now, you mentioned that you and your family members love to talk about how violent Cathy was. Is that right?
No, we didn't love to talk about how violent Cathy was. We talked about what we could do to help her. We didn't want her to lose her job. We didn't want her to be suicidal. And more than anything, we wanted her to try to get better.
Did you talk about how violent your grandson was?
No.
And why not? Weren't you concerned about that?
Objection.
Sustained.
Now, you were concerned about where the defendant would live, correct? In terms of who he might hurt, whether he lived with you and your husband, Nikki, or if he lived with Cathy?
My husband did not want Collin to live with us because he said that if Collin lived with us, Cathy would be over at the house and he didn't want to have to deal with Cathy.
Ma'am, didn't Nikki say he didn't want Collin to live with them because he was afraid that Collin might kill you or kill him?
No.
All right, now let's move on to the subject matter of kitchen knives or butcher knives. Do you tell the jury about the time when you noticed that there was a knife missing from your residence there in Auburndale, and you were trying to figure out who stole the knife or who took the knife?
Yes, there was a small knife with a blade like this that I bought in the dollar store, which is now like the $1.29 store, and it had a protective cover on it, and it wasn't in the drawer with the rest of the knives and silverware.
And did you find out eventually that your grandson had taken the knife?
Yes.
And he basically told you he just needed it just in case and did not elaborate on what he was going to do with it?
He said he just needed it.
Now, at that time also, Cathy made it explicitly clear to you that she was afraid that the defendant might hurt her, correct?
Not at that time, it was later.
And there was multiple times when Cathy let you know that she was afraid for your safety and for her own safety.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that a couple of things about the 7th and the 8th of September. You mentioned that Collin told you that he didn't have a phone with him on the 7th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you aware that he did have his cell phone with him and it was in his car?
So his cell phone had been turned off by his mother. She used to do that anytime she'd kick him out. She'd turn the cell phone off. In fact, it's in the records that she turned it off, and she turned it on, and she turned it off.
And you mentioned that the sliding door, that it had no lock on. Is that correct?
We had adapted the sliding door for a doggy door so Freddie could go in and out when he was staying in Auburndale, my basset hound. And so we did not have a locking mechanism. You could close the door, but you couldn't lock it.
And so that's how you mentioned that your grandson was able to get into your house on the 7th?
Mm-hmm. Oh, plus the front door was, I don't believe in locks. I've been burglarized and the burglars got in quicker than I could find my lock. I don't lock things.
Okay. Now, your response when this was going on, when law enforcement made contact with you, was that you didn't know that Collin was a psychopathic killer, correct?
I never said that. Never.
If I may approach, please, Your Honor.
You may.
And I'm going to show you page 59 of 67 of your statement on September 8th.
See it before you approach.
I'm sorry?
I wanted you to see what he's referring to before he approaches.
Ma'am, if you could just take your time and read the highlighted portion to yourself.
For one thing, I don't use words like stupid, Collin. I would never say that.
Oh, ma'am.
He just wants you to do that to yourself.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
We may need to go sidebar real quick.
Have you finished reading it?
All right, they are going to take a sidebar in that case, so it gives us an opportunity to bring in our guest who is joining us this hour to discuss this case. Joining us now from Oakland, California, trial attorney Lateef Gray. Lateef, thank you so much for joining us today. All right, we've been watching this case out of Florida, the grandmother on the stand. What are you taking away so far from this witness?
Good morning. I'm taking away, I think the grandmother is trying to be honest about her family's history and what she said, but I think like a lot of witnesses who in the heat of the moment they make statements and then they realize after the fact that some of the things that they said aren't helpful to their family member or friend's case. So I get the sense that she made these statements and now she's trying to retract them because she realizes that they don't help her grandson's case at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting testimony to say the least. Okay, we are going to take this opportunity to squeeze in a really quick break, and then we want to get our viewers back to this case we're watching out of Florida. More from the deadly son murder trial. This is for Collin Griffith. We will be right back. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
She thinks I'm going to kill her, and then I want to kill her.
Do you? A troubled teen who fatally shot his own father
now stands accused for the murder of his mother.
I'm not a psychopath. I'm not this murderer.
Was it an argument that led to a tragic accident?
Or a fit of rage that ended in cold-blooded murder?
Everybody that's special to him in his life
is dead. The Deadly Son murder trial. Live coverage today, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. We are bringing you the murder trial for 17-year-old Collin Griffith. This is taking place in Florida. He is being tried as an adult and is accused of murdering his mother just months after he killed his father. Now, Collin claims he killed his dad in self-defense and that his mother died after she fell on a knife during an argument. Let's get you back into the courtroom now. On the stand is the defendant's grandmother, Susan Dethman.
Miss Dethman, we're almost done, all right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Dethman, is it a fair statement that Cathy had expressed to you that she was getting very frustrated with the fact that your grandson wouldn't do his chores, was disrespectful, and was basically just taking his mom for granted?
Yes.
And when Cathy was communicating with you on September 7th and September 8th, that was the Saturday and the Sunday, she did so by both text messages as well as phone calls, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Cathy made it clear that she wanted your grandson home by 10 a.m. on Sunday, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then when that didn't happen, when 10 a.m. came and went, she still made it clear that she wanted your grandson to come home, correct?
Yes.
And Cathy mentioned that she wanted him home. She wanted him to go get work at Domino's from like 4 or 4:30 to 8 or 8:30 on Sunday, correct?
Yes.
And your grandson was working at Domino's, correct?
Yes, he was.
And so Cathy wanted him home so he could then go to Domino's that night, correct?
Yes.
And then kind of towards the end of the communications, then Cathy told you she was going to your house to get Collin to come home, correct?
Yes.
And she told you that either he could go home with her or he could drive, basically follow her in his car, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your time today, Ms. Dethman.
Thank you.
Regret?
I have no regret.
Is the witness released?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Levine, is she released?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.